Hi everyone, as Chris said, this is Paula Richter, and I'm going to be providing an overview of the riparian area management requirements under draft AgOrder 4.0. I'll be covering these topics. First, I'm going to describe the two different types of setbacks in the order, the prioritization areas, the compliance pathways, monitoring and reporting requirements, and then finish up with the time schedules. So there's two types of setbacks in the order. The first is an operational setback. An operational setback is an area that's adjacent to a water body where certain activities like crop production, heavy equipment operation, chemical storage, or chemical applications are prohibited. An operational setback is primarily for sediment and erosion control. There's no vegetation requirements, but bare soil vulnerable to erosion needs to be minimized. The other type of setback is a riparian setback. Riparian setbacks protect water quality. They regulate water temperature and provide pollinator habitat, flood resilience, and groundwater recharge, among other things. Riparian setbacks have diverse trees, shrubs, and grasses. Now I'm going to go on to discuss the prioritization areas. Riparian priority areas are based on ranch location and will be implemented over time. There's 4 riparian priority areas. They're primarily located in the lower portions of watersheds. Farms in riparian priority area 1 will need to implement and meet the requirements before priority area 2, and so on. Priority Area 1 will be in the lower Santa Maria watershed, Area 2 in the lower Salinas, Area 3 in the lower Santa Ynez and Pajaro watersheds, and finally Area 4, which is in the central coastal, San Antonio, and Santa Barbara coastal watersheds. Farms in riparian priority areas have 4 compliance pathways to meet the requirements, and I'm going to discuss those in later slides. Areas that are not displayed on this map are not in a riparian priority area. These farms will need to have an operational setback. In preparation for adoption of AgOrder 4.0, we're going to prioritize certain activities as well. We will conduct focused outreach and education specific to the riparian area management requirements. We will also indicate on your electronic notice of intent or ENOI forms whether your farm is in a riparian priority area or not, and what the setback requirement is. We also plan to release an interactive map very soon, and this map will allow you to click on a stream or a water body and determine what priority area you are in and whether you need to have a riparian setback or an operational setback. We're also going to develop guidelines that will help you to determine how to take the measurements of the width and vegetation cover in your riparian area, because you'll need to report that on your annual compliance form. And finally, we will be working with third parties to develop work plans that can identify cooperative watershed restoration opportunities in our region. And we are very hopeful that third parties will come forward with some really creative and innovative ways to comply with these riparian area management requirements. So as I mentioned, there's multiple compliance pathways under the order. Operational setbacks are required if you're not located in a riparian priority area. But if you are in a priority area, then you have 4 different pathways. The cooperative approach, it just requires that you join a third-party program that implements a watershed restoration program. The OnFarm setback approach requires that you have an existing riparian setback that meets the requirements in table C.5-1 and 2 of the order, or you establish one on your farm. The fourth compliance pathway is to, third, is to have a rapid assessment conducted on the existing on-farm setback and achieve a minimum score. Finally, the fourth compliance pathway is to submit an alternative proposal for a setback. So now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each of the four compliance pathways and operational setbacks. So again, the operational setback is required if your farm is not in a riparian priority area. If you're in a riparian priority area and you choose either the cooperative approach or the alternative proposal compliance pathways, you would also need to establish an operational setback on your farm. If you're in a riparian priority area and you decide to participate in the cooperative approach, you simply need to join that third-party program. You would also need to have an operational setback on your farm, as I mentioned. And I just want to point out that this is, I believe, the most flexible option available to you. For example, if buyers or auditors are concerned about having a riparian area adjacent to your farm, then this pathway would allow you to avoid that potential conflict. Another compliance pathway is the on-farm setback. If your existing setback meets the requirements in the order, then you've met the requirement. If it does not, then you'd need to take some actions to meet the requirements. An example of things you could do would be to expand the area near the water body and plant a mixture of native grasses, shrubs, and trees. You might need to provide water for a year or so until they get established. It might even be longer in the event of a drought. And you may also need to do some weeding to keep out non-native invasive plant species. But once the riparian setback is established, you've met the requirement. Under the rapid assessment compliance pathway, we are using a tool that assesses the condition of riparian areas along a stream reach. This assessment yields an overall score that assesses the quality of the riparian area. The score is based on rapid assessments that have been conducted at reference sites in agricultural areas of our region that are in good condition. If your existing setback meets the minimum reference site score, you've met the requirement. If it doesn't, then you would need to take actions to achieve the score. Just like the OnFarm setback, ways to increase your score could be to improve the conditions of the setback area near the water body. Once the score is achieved, you met the requirement. Finally, you can submit an alternative proposal for executive officer approval. You would need to have an operational setback on the farm, and the proposal needs to demonstrate that the setback won't degrade water quality. In addition, if you select this pathway, you would need to conduct ranch-level surface water monitoring. Next, I'm going to talk about the monitoring and reporting requirements for each of these four compliance pathways. All ranches will need to report the following information on their annual compliance form: the existing setback width and vegetation, the compliance pathway that you're going to follow, and, as you've done in the past, management measures you've implemented or intend to implement related to riparian area management or sediment and erosion control in your operational setback, whichever applies. If you choose the cooperative approach, you need to report that on your annual compliance form. No further monitoring or reporting is required from you. The third party will be responsible for submitting annual reports to us. If you choose the on-farm setback compliance pathway, you need to report the setback width and vegetation cover on your annual compliance form each year. If you choose the rapid assessment method, you also need to report the setback width and vegetation as well as your assessment score. Finally, if you choose the alternative proposal, you need to submit and implement a work plan, which the executive officer must approve, as I mentioned earlier, and you would be required to report annually on your ranch level surface water monitoring. Next, I'm going to finish up with a table that shows the interim and final compliance deadlines for each of the four pathways. The compliance deadlines for the cooperative approach would be defined in the work plan that the third party submits. The interim compliance dates, they're essentially check-ins. We want to ensure that you're on track to comply with whatever pathway you've chosen, and that if you're not on track, you are prepared to implement management measures that can ensure you will meet the final compliance deadline. The final compliance deadline is when you need to demonstrate that you've met the requirement. We recognize that, in particular, if you choose the on-farm setback approach and potentially the alternative proposal, there may be significant time involved in developing a riparian area. And so we built in a timeline to account for that. For example, the interim compliance date for riparian priority area 1 isn't until 2027, and the final compliance deadline is 2030. If your farm is not in a riparian priority area, then you must have your operational setback established by October of 2022 before the winter rainy season begins. With that, that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions, and thank you for your time.